we bring in KC Joyner to talk about the Eagles and their game, and then also take a look around every game that happened in the NFL. And now we're gonna kind of switch the rules up a little bit, Casey. After we talk Eagles, we're gonna get into the games that actually mattered. I don't think you really want to talk about the old Tampa Bay Atlanta game that mattered nothing to nobody in the NFL. But we'll start off with the Eagles game as we always do. Eagles win 34-17. I guess the question we would ask you, Casey, because we've been kind of pondering this for the 3 hours of this show, is that how do the Eagles keep beating teams with the same offensive formula week after week? Screens, a little running here, a little side throw there, and then every once in a while Carson puts the ball in the air deep. But it's basically a dink and dunk offense that they seem to be able to work to exactly what they need, over 400 yards in each of the 4 last games.
About dink and dunk passing, about short passing, that your short passing is always predicated on whatever coverage is against you. So your short passing game should be, okay, they're playing this coverage, we're going to throw these passes that we know will work. And usually you're going to, they're going, you'll take what they give you theory, but that's what Walsh was talking about, was that if you schematically do things correctly, you should be able to hit your short passing game on a highly consistent basis, because the defense usually is just not going to try and take that away from you. There's 3 levels that they have to defend, and usually a defense can only defend 2. So I think that's a big part of why. I also think, and this might be a theme for this whole game for the last month, is that when you look at the Eagles' talent and what they've done talent-wise, their coaching staff, I'm becoming more convinced that their coaching staff and their personnel staff are in sync more than almost any team in the league. They're not. There's some teams that are very just as good, but they're easily in the top 10 as far as how they're in sync as to what the coaches want, what the personnel people give them.
Where do you put this 4-week performance by Carson Wentz among what you've seen in the past? We were talking about Aaron Rodgers in 2010 when I think he had like 16 guys on injured reserve, and then he came into Philadelphia, won that first-round game, and then set them in sail to win their Super Bowl. And even in the Super Bowl game, they lost Woodson and Donald Driver, and they just kept losing guys, but Aaron Rodgers was playing at the top of his game. Where are you putting Carson Wentz's 4-week stretch here among what you've seen in NFL history?
I think that's a fantastic comparison there to say that what you're saying there with Rodgers. It's something that Phillip Rivers did repeatedly in his career. You would just get players.
I'm glad he liked the comparison, because Aaron Rodgers, that will always stand out to me. The fact that Aaron Rodgers basically took a team. I remember that year. They were pulling guys off the street. Now, most of their injuries that year were on defense, right? They were pulling guys off the street to play defense. But they came in, if you guys remember that game, they came into Philadelphia. Aaron was hot, throwing it to everybody. And that's the game where Michael Vick had a chance to win it at the end, and he kind of ran this hurry up at the end and threw a Hail Mary to Riley Cooper on the last play of the game that did not work out. And then, of course, they went on and won their next game on the road, and then went to the Super Bowl, and they beat Pittsburgh, was it? I think Green Bay beat Pittsburgh. They had beaten I want to say Arizona in the championship game. I forget, but it was just an unbelievable run.
It's just funny hearing those names, thinking about where we are now with Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz, Miles Sanders, and you're throwing it back to Mike Vick and Riley Cooper. We've come a long way with the Super Bowl championship in the mix.
Absolutely. Actually, how many of there's not even that many players on the field right now that were on the field in 2017 when they won the Super Bowl. Right, and the quarterback certainly wasn't there. We know that. Miles Sanders wasn't there. Boston Scott wasn't there.
Dude, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, it seems like there's more. Right?
Yeah, like who was there?
Malcolm Jenkins.
Roddy
McLeod, Fletcher Cox.
McLeod, yeah. Brandon Graham, of course.
Brandon Graham was there, yeah.
It is more on the defensive, but none of the linebackers, right?
No.
I mean,
was
we're so far removed.
No, he wasn't in there.
I think Camus was on special teams. He was not a linebacker.
He wasn't there yet. They only had 4 starters yesterday from week 1.
How about
just
that?
to put that into perspective? I mean, 4 from yesterday's game. It's crazy.
Right. Vinny Curry was there, but he had to leave and come back.
Yep.
All right. I think we got Casey back on the line. Casey, we were talking about where this Carson Wentz performance over the last 4 weeks ranks among what you've seen in NFL history.
I think it's, as I mentioned, I think it was a great comparison for Rodgers. Phillip Rivers is a quarterback who could do that. You've seen Brady do that over the years. There aren't many quarterbacks who you can do that too. And it says that you understand the system and that you understand what your players can do. Again, coming back to the coaching staff, finding the things that the players can do and communicating that to Wentz to be able to do that as well. I think it's an elite skill, and I think people have been questioning whether Wentz is that guy. I think this is starting to show that Wentz is a franchise quarterback, and if you give him great talent or really good talent and give him healthy talent heading into a playoff run, I think it's going to be even scary for the league.
What are you seeing on tape from a defensive standpoint? Are teams blitzing Carson enough in your impression? Because you would think that with the weaponry that they're putting out there, everybody would just play man and then try to, harass Carson with as many defenders as possible.
I would think so. I totally agree. No, I don't. I think they're thinking. I think what teams have been thinking is, okay, the Eagles don't have these weapons, and they have been of the mindset that most people assume, most pundits and fans and analysts would be of him. That okay, I'm not sure that Wentz is that guy yet. So okay, look at the people he's got. He's got Joshua Perkins. There's no way he's going to be able to do anything about it. We were talking on Friday about that. That whether or not Perkins had done well in college and things. But again, it comes back to what I think is the big storyline here is that you've got what the coaches want and what the personnel directors will give them. And when you look at Perkins, you take Perkins and you add that to Goddard and you add that to Ertz. It reminds me of the old Washington Redskins when they used to have the three great tight ends under Gibbs, and then one was a great receiver, one was a great blocker, and one could do both. I think that's what they're having now. But again, if you're the Eagles and you have Ertz, most teams would go, okay, we don't need that good a tight end behind him, and they've got three guys now who they can go and use. And that doesn't even talk about what they're doing with Sanders and Scott and the whole 9 yards there. So I think the Eagles have found ways through their personnel staff to find players who fit what the offense wants to do, and it makes it a whole lot easier for Wentz.
Yeah, staying on that topic, Casey, and we've been talking about this a lot today and for weeks now at this point, but what do you see out there? Like, are these guys that have been forced into bigger roles on the field, the Perkins, Goddard, although he's had a role in some form, Miles Sanders as the main guy, are they legitimate pieces, Greg Ward, or is it a product of the opponents over the past 4 games?
Part of it's the opponents. I'm convinced Sanders can be, over the last month, I mean, he got injured yesterday, obviously, but prior to that, probably the last month, I would estimate that he had been a top 5 back. He's not McCaffrey. He's not Saquon. He's not one of those guys. But there weren't that many backs beyond those elite guys who were playing better than he was over the last month. Now, having said that, running backs, they all do running backs even matter and things. Is he that guy long term? I don't know. But the thing is that you can put together a backfield and say, okay, we've got Sanders, we've got Howard, we've got Scott, we've got other people. I think that it could be a combination of can the Eagles have a top 10 running game? Yeah. And as far as the receivers go, I like where Ward is. And again, I think that tight end core. I think if you keep this tight end core together and start going to more 3 tight end sets, because we keep talking again and again on the show about they need to go heavy, they need to go heavy, they need to go heavy. And they throw these 3 wide receiver sets and just want to tear your hair out. It's like now you've got 3 tight ends. You can go heavy and still throw the football field up. You can have the best of both worlds. So I think from that perspective, it is something to omen for the future.
Coming into this game, I was really concerned with the cornerbacks and how they were going to hold up. I thought Crayvon LeBlanc, Avonte Maddox, Sidney Jones, I thought they did really well. What did you think about the cornerbacks as a whole, as a unit?
You're going up against a good crew. You're going against Tate Shepard and Slayton. That's a really good crew. And mind you, I don't like what they did against the tight end, though. That's one thing that concerned me is that the Caden Smith, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 98 yards. That was a concern, but they didn't. The longest reception that they allowed us to Slayton for 33 yards, but they didn't really get beat over the top. So I think it's a matter of the Eagles have always. And the thing is you've got Barkley. That was the big concern coming in is they're going to have to go and stop Barkley. And really, besides the one long run they did, he gets 92 yards total. They had a 68-yard run on. So he had 16 carries for 24 yards outside of the one long gain. So they did stop Barkley, other than, again, the one play. We talked about that last week, that he tends to get one big play and does nothing. So they did what they needed to do with him. And then with the receivers, they were able to keep the big plays from going. And I didn't see many mistakes in coverage. And that was a big thing for them, too, is that are you going to blow coverages against these guys? Because Slate can beat you deep and Tate can beat you deep if you blow coverages. And I think they played well there. So it's more of a matter of whether they were where they were supposed to be. And if they keep doing that, they'll be competitive in the playoffs with this crew.
Give me your impressions of Avonte Maddox in particular, because he's had to play. He's a natural slot corner. They did play him on the outside a little bit. He has struggled there at times. He seemed a little bit more prepared for it yesterday.
He did, and I think that they're finding ways to only limit him to give him certain, because if you're trying to make players do everything, I think since what the Patriots do with their corners, they find ways to say, okay, we're going to give our cornerbacks certain rules, we're going to make you do just this.
Right.
And again, it's coming back to what the coaching staff and the personnel people and saying, hey, this is what we're finding, what you can do. I think that the Eagles are finding what their players can do and getting them into those roles. I think that they've had trouble with that in the past, and I think, again, sometimes they try to have the players do too much, and they need to just let those players do their job and not leave them on islands and such. And I think the more they're playing those kind of coverages and things, the more they're playing the off coverages, more they're going to just not try and put those guys on islands. I think that's going to be better for them.
Yeah, we'll call this the Kyle Arrington formula, where you take a defensive back and you just find what he does best and try to exploit it.
Yep.
I mean, they won a Super Bowl with him, right?
They did, and then even the Super Bowl, they had to take him out, and they found somebody else who could do it. But that's what you try and do with them, is try and find very specific things. I think people like to think, well, there are some cornerbacks, your Trey Davis's White and things like that, people like that, Gilmore's, who can do everything. But the other cornerbacks, you just need to find certain things that they can do. And the thing is, if you get them on the outside, then just say, okay, well, you're going to stop certain route combinations. We're going to take certain things away from the defense, because sometimes I think the Eagles try to be such a big play defense, they try to do too much, and it's take away something from the defense, from the offense, and then try to make the big play. But don't try and do both. If you try and do both, you're trying to get too much.
Who are you more a believer in, as this guy can play at the NFL level and be impactful? Boston Scott or Greg Ward?
Depends on what you want Greg Ward to do. If you want Greg Ward to be a possession receiver, if that's what you're okay with, and mind you, there's a lot of value in that role, then I would probably say Ward, if only because as much as I like what Scott can do, if you block well, you can get a lot of backs to do pretty well in the NFL. And running is more about blocking than it is anything else, whereas receiving, it is more about being able to get open. And I'm not sold on his long-term prospects, but his ability to get open and find the short pass routes and find those soft areas in the defense and being able to do what he does there, that's a skill set that could be more valuable than what Scott has to offer. Because, again, I think Scott is more a beneficiary, not taking anything away from him, but there are a lot of backs who could do what he does if you give him the type of block that Philadelphia's been given.
All right. Before we go on to the other NFL games, let me get your early impression of Eagles hosting the Seahawks on Sunday afternoon.
They ought to be very thankful they're getting the Seahawks, because that's
thank the referees.
Yes. I think that the Seahawks, their passing game hasn't been as good of late. Lockett had fantastic numbers in 2018. In 2019, he's doing it somewhat as well, but not quite. So their passing game isn't as dangerous as it has been in the past. And their ground game obviously is now struggling because they've lost all the running backs. So I think the Eagles could stop the running game, and if they'll play smart on defense and they'll keep the big plays and they'll find a way to keep Wilson in the pocket and such and do things there, I think that they're playing it not a limited offense, but they're playing an offense that's 70% of what it would be at full strength.
All right, let's go around the NFL, Casey, with our remaining minutes here. We'll talk about teams that were in games that had some kind of impact or implication. Now, Jets-Bills was kind of a rest-the-starters game for Buffalo. They were close. They lost 13-6. But if you're the Jets, do you take anything away from that win? I mean, I heard the head coach, Adam Gase, basically said that Le'Veon Bell's future is not even his decision, which is weird.
He doesn't want to pay that much money to run back. He shouldn't have paid that much money to run back. He didn't, but the organization shouldn't. So I get where he's coming from there. And I keep saying that Gase is a guy who, you look at what they went 6-2 in the last 8, and that team has some talent, and they can add more talent to it. And again, part of the reason they struggled in the beginning was they didn't have Darnold. So I think Gase is an underrated coach, and I think if you give him a good amount of talent that the Jets might be able to do, they could be a playoff contender. They could give the Bills a run for their money. So I don't think much from it, but I think it says something for what Gase's coaching was.
Are you a believer in Sam Darnold? Very weird stat line yesterday, 199 yards, a touchdown, a pick.
Still so sold on what he did in college. I love this college tape, and there weren't many quarterbacks. Watching him in college, it was like when I watched Andrew Luck, it was clear. Andrew Luck was what he was. He's a once in a generation quarterback. But seeing Darnold in college, it was not quite luck, but he's pretty close. And I'm seeing enough in the NFL to where it's, I don't give up on him yet. I think he's got a very bright future. And again, give him some talent around him too. Don't give him Le'Veon Bell. Give him some better receivers and give him some better blocking. Let's see what he does.
Now the Packers had something to play for against the Lions, and they wound up winning the game. It looked like they were going to lose for about 3/4 of that game, Casey, and then they finally came back and won. How are you feeling about the Packers in that game, and then also as a number 2 seed? I feel like they're a little bit vulnerable.
I think they're very vulnerable. I think it also came off a very emotional game, and Bill Walsh always said that it's hard to play back-to-back emotional games, that you just have to establish a certain level of performance. But it does say something that Rodgers can do what he did, because he looked terrible, like mediocre for the first portion of the game, and then he comes back and takes apart that secondary. It also says something, though, that the Packers, what concerned me the most was that they, A, didn't look like they were taking the game that seriously, and B, all those trick plays, they weren't ready for them. And it's okay, if you're not ready for them there, I got to wonder if other teams are going to start running on trick plays against you again, because as the Eagles saw earlier this year, if teams start beating on one trick play, they'll keep coming back to it. So Green Bay's got to worry about that a lot, I think.
No doubt about it. Chargers-Chiefs. Now the Chiefs needed to win that game because they were playing at the same time as New England. Now, I don't know if you saw the Kevin Harlan video, Casey, of him basically broadcasting the end of both games at the same time. That was unbelievable.
He is a legend. He is awesome. He's best announcer. I don't know why he doesn't get more credit for it. He should be on an A team. I understand why he's not, but he should be on an A team.
I like the way the Chiefs are playing, Casey, and they've been my Super Bowl pick all year, and I'm not backing down no matter how good Baltimore's looked. They beat Baltimore.
They did, and their defense is playing spectacular. I posted on Twitter. I said something like, the Chiefs are now winning as much of their defense and running game as they are their passing game. And people were bashing, like, oh, no. I'm like, guys, do you not understand? Your defense is playing at a lights-out level, and that's the whole point. Last year, Kansas City got into 9 shootout games, game where each team scores 24 more points. They went 5-4 in those contests. They were unbeaten when they didn't get to shootout games. Now they have a defense and a running game that's going to keep them from getting into shootout games during the playoffs. And they right now, if you look at the Vegas odds, I believe they're second to Baltimore. Baltimore's 2-1 and Kansas City's 3-1, and I could see why. I'm with you that I think Kansas City should actually be the favorite because Baltimore's got fewer paths to victory than Kansas City does.
Bears, Vikings, NFC North. Now the Vikings rested everybody and still gave the Bears a pretty good game. I almost look at this game and I applaud the Bears for finishing 500. It's been a very tumultuous year for them. The Vikings rested everybody and nearly pulled this one off. I think the Vikings should feel pretty decent about their odds in New Orleans.
They should, and hopefully they can have the full complement of their ground game too. Because Madison, when Madison's a solid backup for Cook, and then Mike Boone, the guy who fantasy owners were dying with in Week 16. They wish he would have had that Week 17 performance in Week 16, but he's okay. But Cook is their offense, and if they get Cook back, and they've got Diggs, and they got Thielen somewhat healthy now. B.C. Johnson's turned out to be a solid slot receiver. They got Rudolph. They got Irv Smith as a second tight end. I mean, this is a team that's got a lot of talent and can go into get into high-scoring games if they have to. So I think Minnesota could scare some people, but that Green Bay game still is just what they did there just is still. That makes me worry about their playoff hopes.
Well, the Patriots lose at home, and that's what helps the Chiefs get the number 2 seed. The Patriots lose at home to the Dolphins. So the Patriots are going to play on Wild Card Weekend for the first time since I think I was in diapers, Casey. Interesting game. I think, Fitzpatrick has made a case to come back next year, even if they draft a guy to kind of groom him. And the Dolphins, they fight hard for their coach.
And I posted on Twitter that earlier this year, go back to the beginning of the year, everybody was saying the Dolphins are the worst team in NFL history, and they were comparing the Patriots defense to the 1985 Bears and the Ravens and things are the greatest defense of all time. And yesterday the Dolphins put up, and remember the stat record, it's 380 offensive yards, and they scored 20 offensive points, and they pulled off the upset, and they were hitting trick plays, doing all kinds of things, getting New England out of position. I mean, they were, again, trick plays taking it to the Patriots in a game where the Patriots should have known that might be coming and things because they knew what Flores could do. So kudos to Flores, and I think it shows the Patriots' defense is nowhere near what they were, and their offense is bad, too. I think the Patriots' dynasty ends this offseason.
Oh, interesting. Patriots' dynasty ends? That's a headline, Casey. We'll see what happens there. Everybody's making a big deal.
Hey, Brady might not come back.
I know. Everybody's talking about that. The Saints go to Carolina, and they pound them 42-10. This has got to be one of the best wild card teams you're ever going to see in NFL history. 13-3, and really kind of scoring a lot of points here at the end of the season. They're a well-oiled machine right now.
The NFL does need to change the seeding rules to where they find if you win your division, you get a playoff spot. But really, I mean, it shouldn't be. No offense, Philadelphia. They shouldn't be. New Orleans should be having a home playoff game. Philadelphia should have to go on their own. Having said that, New Orleans did what they did yesterday. I still couldn't understand though. It's in the third quarter. They're up. I think it was 35-3, and Breeze is out there and Thomas is out there. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Somebody needs to send Sean Payton that video of Wes Welker getting hurt. Was it 2010 when he played in the Houston game in the first quarter and blew out his knee and it blew the whole playoff run. I'm like, somebody needs to send them that because it was risky for them to do that, but that they played at that level shows that they're just they're going into the playoffs, maybe playing as better than any team in the league other than Baltimore.
If Lamar Jackson were not in the equation, where would Michael Thomas be in your MVP voting?
I got CMC in there too. So, but Michael
on
Thomas,
a losing team.
But he's that valuable. Imagine how bad they would have been if McCaffrey doesn't play
I guess
that well.
so. I mean, if you're going to put it that way, sure.
I have fantasy football projections that I do. Thomas was doing so well. He broke the system. Like 100 is supposed to be the greatest grade, and if I would have taken the cap off the grades, he would have like 120 grades. I mean, it would have been like off the charts. He would have made everybody else look pitiful by comparison. What he did, if it wasn't for Lamar, I could absolutely see giving tons of votes to him. In fact, he should still get a lot of second place votes. Obviously, Lamar's going to win it, but I think it's those three. I think it's Lamar. I think it's Michael Thomas. I think it's Christian McCaffrey, or like the three. But Thomas could be too if you push me hard enough.
Well, the Cowboys were getting pushed hard. They had a chance to get in if the Eagles lost. They win 47-16, and I think this is interesting, right? Because when the Eagles beat the Cowboys 2 weeks ago, everybody said, well, this Cowboys team is dysfunctional. But the week before, they had crushed the Rams, and everybody thought the Cowboys had gotten their act back together. So 2 out of the last 3 weeks, the Cowboys score a lot of points and blow out an opponent. But that one loss was to the Eagles here in Philly. I don't know what that says about them, but I think it actually makes Philadelphia look a little bit better now.
It does make them look a little bit better, and now this is another game where the Eagles took a team that a great offensive team and found a way to limit what that team can do. That's why I say they're not playing lights out defense, but they're not giving up those huge plays. And I still think Dallas said when it came to Dallas in that yesterday too, same thing. We're going to go passive. We're going to go passive. We're going to go passive. And mind you, it works against Washington. Washington, by the way, had tons of injuries. As far as great as Dallas played, I mean, they were going against Aaron Colvin, Kayvon Webster. I think it was Cody Sensabaugh was their nickel. They had a backup strong safety. Even the backup free safety they had was battling a knee injury coming into the game. So I think it says more about Washington than it does about Dallas, but give kudos to them. But if Dallas's coaching staff is gone, maybe at least their offensive coaches will have good job opportunities.
All right, in Baltimore, I thought the lock of the week was the Ravens getting 2 points at home from the Steelers. I know the Steelers had a chance to make the playoffs and Baltimore's resting starters, but I think we show what this game showed, and I took Baltimore, was how deep Baltimore is and how good they are. It's not just Lamar. He's a big part of it. And also the Steelers on their quarterback situation, that the magic was going to start to run out. It
did. You can only get by on subterfuge for so long. You can only do that for a
subterfuge.
Time.
Nice word.
Yeah. Thank you. And the Steelers couldn't. The Steelers also look like they just ran out of gas. I mean, they've been playing. You'll see this happen where a team will have problems like they did. I remember this happened with Jeff Fisher team years ago, one of his Titans teams, where they were banged up, and then he got them and pushed some buttons in them and really fired the team up. And he got them to play good for like a 5 or 6 game stretch, and then the bottom just fell out because you could see they ran out of gas. I think the Steelers ran into the same problem, but Baltimore is also showing this whole pass. Okay, power football has never not worked in the NFL in the entire history of the league, and it still works today. And that's why Baltimore is the scariest team, because they play power football better than any team in the league.
Are the Texans going to regret resting starters and losing to the Titans 35-14 in the final week of the season?
They were so banged up, and they had so many injuries there that I think that might be a case. And that's where I think Bill O'Brien was trying to send a message to his team, because if you just rest the starters, it can be where I think that's why New Orleans kept the stars up as long as they did. You're playing at that level, and you don't want to give the team the idea that we don't want to play at that level. But in O'Brien's case, his players are so banged up, he wanted to make the idea of, okay, we're not going to play our starters, or we might, depending on if the Chargers pull off the upset and things, we may play them, but we're probably not going to. We're going to prep like we are. He wanted to keep that mindset going. So if he kept that team's mindset going, then I'm okay with the move, because I think it'll pay off in better health. But it's a risky move.
All right, the big question we all want to ask as we finish out the games, Casey, if the Seahawks had not had that penalty at the 2-yard line, would Pete Carroll have handed the ball to Marshawn Lynch for the touchdown?
I think that he would have had 78,000 people in that stadium would have rushed to the field if he didn't. I think they would have carried him out of the stadium and tossed him into the what do they get the lake or the river next to him and things. I think that would have been the end of his tenure there.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
There you go, Puget Sound. Yes.
All right, well, that was a 3,000-mile penalty that cost them because now they got to travel across the country to play the Eagles. We will certainly catch up with you again at the end of the week, Casey, and go through all the playoff games. We thank you so much for joining us, man. Have a great new year.
You too. Appreciate it, guys.